Hey everybody, it's John Wheatcroft here with our Sunday Q&A. We're up to number 19, I believe. Hope that you're staying safe. I hope that you're well. I know lockdown has kicked back in again. So just when it looked like things were moving in the right direction, it seems like we've taken a step backwards. And I hope that's not having too big an impact upon you. I know musicians were having a tough time of it at the moment. So the only perhaps saving grace is that you may find yourself with a little bit more time. So for me anyway, it's the time to do the things that very often that get put sort of to the bottom of the list just because you're so busy with the day-to-day. So that could be for me a composition, writing and recording new material. So I'm hoping at the end of this I'll have something productive to show for it. You know, I'm I think about 6 tracks into this new album, and also it's one of the reasons for doing these things on a Sunday as well. So as I've done every week for the last 16, 17 weeks, I'm going to play a piece for you to begin. So I'm going to play Toots Thielemans' Bluesette. Now what I've done here, or what I'm about to do, is in my own personal practice, I sometimes plant ideas, I leave ideas so that even though it's improvised, there's some kind of a plan. So just to let you in on my thought process before I play this tune, what I've been thinking of with particular kind of significance of late is the idea of being melodic and being in control with what I play, meaning trying not to play too many sort of digital patterns, you know, playing things that I can't truly hear, that I'm not really sort of inside the music, and it can become, guitar's a particularly bad instrument for this. You can end up playing sort of music that's coming from the fingers rather than music that's coming from the head. Now, there's an argument that it's a two-way street, meaning how would one ever be able to hear something if they'd not played it beforehand? And in fact, we're going to get into some patterns later on in the main part of this that will probably be beyond your realm of hearing to begin with. They certainly were for me. And in some instances, they still are, you know, and that's one of the things that I continue to work on when practicing, is to be able to hopefully hear everything that I can play. But there's definitely a kind of a two-way relationship going on here. Sometimes you'll play something that you don't truly know what it sounds like until you've played it a bunch of times, and then it becomes something that you can maybe even practice away from the guitar. So anyway, the thought process that I've planted for myself before, whilst practicing this tune, and I'm going to maintain it for the recording, is to try to play things that I'm hearing in my head as musical lines rather than thinking of it in a sort of an academic way. It's this scale, it's this arpeggio or what have you. So anyway, on with the music, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Great stuff. I had a question from Andy about the use of open string scales in jazz. They're generally the domain of the country player, but they've noticed that I was using some in some of the pieces that I've played. And specifically about the solo piece, Unclaimed Treasure, it's got a little open string section. So I'll show you that as a lick, but before that I just wanted to give you some thoughts as to how you might personalise open string scales. So before we look at that, I guess we should define what an open string scale is. So to begin with, we'll use two fingerings. The first one will be a G major scale, and G major is particularly suitable because all of the open strings are in G major: E, A, D, G, B and E. Every one of those notes belongs in the scale, so they've all got potential to be used to replace a fingering. So if you play a conventional G major scale like so, there's no open strings and they don't really ring. The idea is the notes ring separately. Whereas if I play like this, it's a totally different feel to the same notes because the notes ring into one another. So there's essentially two different kind of options. We have the 2 against 1 option, like we have here, B and C on a string, and then an open D, and then E and F sharp, and then an open G. That idea? That's an option. Then we also have the option to play like a roll, like this thing. If I go A, B, C, D, E, forgive me. So A, B is that part, then C, D, E, and that's a roll. Picking two fingers, similar to the hybrid picking thing we were looking at last week. So I could do that with B, C, and D, and E, F sharp, and G as well. I could play them here: B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, like so. They're all choices. So the same fingering is one option. Here's a different option. So it's good to work on these, and there's plenty of sources for this stuff. You know, you generally look for anyone playing a Telecaster is probably going to play something like this. Okay, now my take on this to make them slightly different is to either change the notes so it's not just something playing like the major scale. We'll look at that in a moment. Or to play the major scale juxtaposed in a different place. So G major is not just the potential of just G major. Every other chord that exists in that key can support the scale. So there's an A minor in that key, there's a B minor, B minor 7, there's a C major 7, a different type, with the raised 4 in there. There's a D7 or D11, there's an E minor, there's an F half diminished, and so on. Okay, so maybe if I choose the A minor. So now that's the root now. So now I have a beautiful A Dorian mode. It's exactly the fingerings are the same. The only thing I did there is tag an A onto the end so that it resolved to the tonic. So do you hear how different that sounds? So you can try it against each of the chords. You could try it against A minor, D7, E minor, you name it. So E minor could be this sound. So it's going to be that Aeolian sound. So it's E minor, not G major anymore. Okay. So that's one approach, is to, when you learn these fingerings, so you learn C major, or is it D Dorian, or is it G Mixolydian? Which is it? It doesn't have to just be like because you've learned C major. It doesn't have to just be C major. It could be D minor. Okay, so another option is to take a fingering and then to modify the notes to find different applications for the same kind of physical shape, but not the same harmonic shape. So with this in mind, I'll take a finger for A major. And in this instance, we're going to play between A and A, and I'm going to use the open strings of E and B. Okay. Everything else will be fretted, so I'm going to go A, then G sharp to F sharp, then an E, open, then D to C sharp, an open B, and an A. So total. Okay. Making sense? Okay. And the same thing can go either way. Okay. So that's an A major scale, but it could also be an E7 for the same reasons we outlined a moment ago, without the. So it could be an E7 if you wanted it to be. Okay, so let's just take it as an A thing. So there's A major. So say I wanted a Lydian, so I have to ask myself, say the only notes I can't really change here are the E, which is the 5th of A, and the B, which is the 9th. So everything that I play now has to have perfect 5th and has to have major 9, because I can't change the open strings. I could choose to not play it, but then it sort of defeats the purpose of playing an open string idea if you don't use open strings. So say I wanted a Lydian. A Lydian's going to raise 4, so instead of it being F, D, I go. A Lydian. So say I wanted it to be a Lydian flat 7. I could do that. So I play a flat 7 in there. For you. Okay. Or if I want to mix a Lydian, regular mix a Lydian, instead of having a major 7, that's a regular 4 there. So there's a blues. In fact, with that, I could put the open G string in there. We could extend it and go even further. So major, change the G sharp to a G, that's A7, but of course A7, as we know, is D major scale, so if I'm playing breezing, if I wanted to play the do that if you wish. Okay, so there's a Mixolydian, or D major, or E minor, or any of the things. So that could be Dorian, whatever. So you're trying to find these parallels which make these things much more versatile. Okay, let's keep going. A Mixolydian. Okay, so if I lower the 3rd degree now, so there, instead of it being the C sharp, I put a C natural. We've got our A Dorian back. A Dorian. Now, if I then lower the 6, so instead of it going, if I went, I've got A. Aeolian now, or C major, or any of the things that come from C major, G7, or whatever, whatever you want to find. Whatever's in this. So that's A. So let's do everything just from an A major perspective. There's A major scale, A dominant, Mixolydian, A Dorian, Aeolian, a harmonic minor, So this is one of the things that I tend to use quite a bit. I play minor swing over the 5 chord. I could play that, which is E Phrygian dominant. Ever decided to switch from a Strat to a Telecaster and he wanted to play his harmonic minor runs, you know, he could tag that onto the end of his Phrygian dominant lines, and that would sound really cool. So I wonder, in gypsy jazz, how often do you play an E7 chord with a flat 9? Pretty much every second tune there's one of them, you know, so that's an option of a little idea. Or you could play back to Dorian with a major 7, and you'd have A flat altered, you know, to D flat. Some kind of altered idea, in that case, in A flat. So this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. When I first learned these open string things, what I found really difficult to kind of get my head around was the idea that they're not transposable, and so they felt a little bit like novelties to me, really. Whereas when you learn the jazz phrase, say, you know, say for argument's sake you learn, you know, you've only been playing that a few seconds before you started going, okay, that's in E flat, now it's in E, A, now it's in B, now it's in D, now it's in G. Whereas it doesn't work like that with these open string scales. If you learn this for A, I can't just move it down 2 frets for G. Listen to this. It doesn't work because the open strings, the relationship with the open strings has changed. You'd have to kind of capo them. So what you tend to find is you have like key specific things. So that's a G fingering, and that's different to like a D fingering. That'd be a D fingering, say. So when I first learned them, I felt like they're a bit restrictive, until I then realised, okay, so I've learnt my D fingering, but I can use that against E minor. And that's E Dorian. Oh, that's cool. Okay, that's usable now. Because how often do you play over E minor? Let me show you that one, actually, that's cool. So that's E, F sharp to G, then open A, and then we have a little roll here. We're going to go B, C sharp, open D, and then E. So this E Dorian. And we keep that going. E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E. Okay, so that came from D major, of course, which the E Dorian does. It comes from D major, but being used in that situation. So what I'm asking you to do, really, or what I'm expecting you to do with these things, is to try and be like flexible with them. So once you've learnt it in one key, you know, and you've learnt your D major, which is what I did. I learnt D major, but then I thought, okay, well that could be A11, you know, it could be against A11, and it sounds completely different. That's the root now. That's the root. Even though it's exactly the same thing. So I'm hoping that makes sense. So that's going to be the first thing about open string scales. Next up, I'll show you that phrase that comes from that tune of mine called Unclaimed Treasure. Here's that section from my solo piece called Unclaimed Treasures. That's the part. So it's based around, you could argue it's kind of an inversion of an A major with a sharp 11 in there. So what we have is the third and the tonic of the chord, then the 9 as an open string, then a raised 4 and 5, like so. So we got a Lydian chord, but with open strings. We come down the scale. And the trick to this is ideally what we want at the end is all 4 notes ringing, like so. And then we've got, again, 4 notes ringing in pairs. Really slow. So 9th fret, 7th fret, boom, open B string, 8th fret on the G string, open E string. Okay, that's the first part. Okay. Then we have 9th fret on the B string, 11th fret on the G, open E, and then 13th on the D. And then this is a kind of a interesting open chord, open, 11, 8, open E string, then 5, 9, open, open. Yeah. This is kind of fake open string thing where 2 notes ring into one another. Voila. So there's an interesting chord at the head of this piece, and in fact it's the inspiration behind the whole piece really, is that major 7 but with a suspended 4th. That's not like a super common chord, that. So there we have like a inversion or voicing, drop 2 voicing of E major 7, and the 3rd degree is here. But if I raise it a fret, get the suspended 4th, like a 1 chord. That's a really unusual sound, but it's a really beautiful sound. But the major 7 sus 4 is not like a common chord you see in chord books too often. Partially, I think, because it's so dependent upon where that voice is. So if I put the 4 in the middle, or kind of approaching the middle of the chord like it is here, it really works, even here with a 9 added. If it's on the top of the chord, however, it's not quite so effective. It still works debatably, but I don't think I would have written the piece if that would have been the only option. That is much more where it's at for me. So with these particular chords, like this chord here, that came from Lage Lund, where he takes chords like, in this case, a major 9 chord, and goes through all the inversions by moving each note to the next note in the chord. But with this particular voicing, what's interesting is there's no 5. It's really just 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, root, 9, 3. So that's all there is in this. 7, root, 9, 3, displaced. Okay, and then you can take each note and move it along to the next one. But because there's no 5th, it means when you go from like where normally you might find, say, the 3rd on top, so there's the 9 on top, the next voice in, the 3rd on the top, then the next one is with the 7 on the top. You skip the 5 because there's no 5 in that particular chord. So you get these big, wide stretched and kind of unusual jumps and leaps, and that was a beautiful chord voicing. I thought, well, it's sus for it, you know. So again, like the thing with the open string scales, never be content with just learning one thing. You know, if you learn that as I did from Lage Lund, and I learned that chord voicing, thought, okay, what would the sus4 version of that be? There it is, you know. So that's a new thing. So taking something familiar and stretching it, working in the margins of your playing, that's often where the gold lies. It's taking something and right in the margin of where your knowledge is, how can you just nudge that just a tiny amount to stretch to find the next thing, you know. So I hope that's answered the question. I hope that's helpful. And more importantly, of course, I'm not expecting everyone wants to learn my pieces, but what might be nice is if you take the idea and come up with something similar that's of your own invention, and that could be the nucleus of your own piece. Like for me, these chords, and this one specifically, came from studying some Lage Lund material, and it's ended up as a piece that I've recorded, and it's got a title and it lives, you know. And that came from studying, you know, specific chord voicings, but then trying to come up with something musical. So you do the same, and I look forward to hearing your piece, you know, your version of these ideas. I had a really nice message from Harry relating to a thing we looked at a couple of weeks back, where we were talking about harmonising. I think it was D major, I think, if I'm not mistaken. We harmonised the D major scale, but with all the suspended fourth arpeggios. So you'd end up with things like those kind of ideas, you know. So what I'm doing is taking from every degree of the scale. I can play a sus4, L, bass 4 there, and then you can do that along the length of the string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like so, and then you can stack them across the guitar or in octaves. So on. And so on and so forth. Got this like kind of big intervallic sound. So check it out. I think it's about week 16 or 17 perhaps. But they're all there on YouTube if you want to check it out. So I'm just going to give you a little development on that idea that's actually maybe even simpler, and it could be a good way in. You can do a similar thing with pentatonic scales. So let's do these in D major again. Yeah, why not? So D major or B minor, and we're just going to use the regular, you know, say we start with B minor or D major, depending upon which of those notes you consider to be the root. But you know, the bog standard, everybody knows that shape. Okay, so one of the things I could do to make it more intervallic is, instead of playing every single note, I play a pattern of 1 note, 2 notes, and there's our sus4. Okay, so I can play that from every string. So there, I'm shaping it to fit the pentatonic. So. Or in pairs. Same deal again, they can be moved in octaves. And I can do that with all 5 shapes. Or I can do stacks. So, hope that's making sense. Across all 6 strings. Still 5 pentatonic shapes. Making sense, I hope. Now, of course, we have the option as well, instead of it being like a sus4 type shape, of it being more like a sus2 type shape. Or in some cases, it's going to feel like a minor triad. So instead of going 1 note, 2 notes, 1 note, 2 notes, 1 note, 2 notes, I can go 2 notes, 1 note, 2 notes, 1 note, 2 notes, 1 note. That kind of idea. So again, same deal. Whatever I play here can be moved in octaves. Okay, or it can be played in pairs. Across all 6. gives you a more intervallic, kind of like not dissimilar to, you know, those, when Coltrane later on sort of revisited pentatonic scale, but we'll be playing those kind of patterns. So instead of it sounding like the blues, you might go, that could be the kind of thing Coltrane might play with minor. So what that is, it's all of the kind of interval skip, fourths and thirds. And you hear guys like Robin Ford doing those kind of, playing those kind of licks. That kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the pattern, that's the shape that I'm talking about. So I'm aware of the fact that they are shapes, but what happens once you play them, at first it's going to feel like finger music, that thing that I've been talking about trying to avoid. But then what I found happened for me personally, they were shapes. I didn't really know exactly what was going to come out the guitar. Then I began to hear those open sounds of suspended sounds became something that I can imagine in my mind, and now it's something that I go to more out of a desire for the sound rather than the ease of fingering. So it's like the chicken and the egg. It's like, which comes first? Does playing it come first and then you hear it, or does hearing it come first and then you play it? And in my experience, it's a little bit of both. You know, and I was listening to Coltrane and hearing those kind of, you know, those kind of sounds being used, and then wondering, okay, how do I access them? Then found some ways to get it under my fingers, and then you begin to hear the things that you can play. It's like, do you play what you hear, or can you hear what you can play? It's kind of like a never-ending sort of circle where one thing chases the other, and there'll be times where what you can play will be beyond what you can hear, and then other times where what you can hear will be beyond what you can play, and hopefully that's what keeps us practicing. So I hope you enjoyed that little development of the suspended fourth ideas, but in this time relating to pentatonic. Of course, you're not restricted to just playing major and minor pentatonic. You can do this with dominant pentatonics, you can do it with hybrids, you can do it with anything you want, really anything you want. So I hope that gives you some ideas of ways that you can develop that idea. Let's return to the subject of chromaticism and also a little bit of outside playing. This is based on a question from Charlie. Thanks for that question. Saying, have you got any ideas for things you can do with the whole tone scale? And I know it's something that I've been asked in the past, and Tony's asked about that. It's a common thing, you know, whole tone scale. How do I make that work, right? So this is something that I've been developing in my own playing of late as a means of accessing all 12 notes via whole tone scale. So 12 tone music, dodecaphonics or serialism and all those kind of connected topics is something that you'll hear in 20th century classical music. But it can be used like effectively to create a sense of sort of, it's almost like all 12 notes, but with a sense of order, shall we say. So there's tonality implied, but also we're trying to be ambiguous at the same time, which it sounds contradictory, but I guess the whole thing of outside playing or chromaticism is about that, really. It's about not explicitly stating the harmony, but sort of floating around it, shall we say. So one of the ways we can do this is with the whole tone scale. And why that's really important is, why whole tone scale is particularly cool is, it's in its purest state, it's half of the available notes. So in music, of course, we have 12 notes. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, boom, and then it starts again. The whole tone scale uses 6 of those notes. So in this case, it would be if I play on the E string, it's all the even numbers. Open, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th. That's all the even frets, yeah? So what that means is, not only do I have a whole tone scale from the notes that I play, concerning myself with the notes that I'm actually sounding, if I consider the notes that are not played, what are the notes that are being missed, you have a parallel whole tone scale in the gaps, like a kind of phantom ghost whole tone, which is now based on the odd notes. So 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th, or whatever. Because of course, if I play the two together, first whole tone scale, that's the second pathway, back to the first pathway, second pathway, first, second, or even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd. So I could argue if I'm doing this, what I'm actually doing is playing two whole tone scales. I'm playing an E whole tone and an F whole tone scale. And when you play the two together, you get a chromatic scale. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Right, over an E7, the basis of this will be E whole tone. So here's an E7 with no 5 actually. Deliberately no 5. So E whole tone scale will be. I'll stay mainly around this fingering for now. Okay. So what I can do is, if I harmonise that scale with any of the odd numbered intervals, right? Any interval that's based upon an odd number of semitones, effectively what I'll be doing is harmonising it with the parallel one that fits in the gaps. So, for example, a common whole tone lick is to harmonise with perfect fourths, and perfect fourth is 5 semitones. So I might do this. And I'll go. And if I do that, that's all 12 chromatic notes. That's all of them. They're all in there. So it's akin to going, but it's much more musical. So that's a whole tone scale. I'll use the fingering. Now, below every note now I'm going to play a perfect fourth. You could play them above as well, it's the same thing. And that's chromatic. It's every one of the 12 notes. Where can you play the chromatic scale? Anytime you want. That's a chromatic scale. This doesn't feel like one because you're jumping the notes. You're using the whole tone scale as a means to access all 12. So in a way, think of it this way. The highest notes in each instance, that would be like the even numbers. And the lower note that follows is the odd numbers. So I can do this with any odd numbered interval. So I can do it with semitones. For the purposes of now, I'll just do it going below. I'm going to play the whole tone notes, and then I'll play the associated interval below. But it could be above, or it could be above and below as well. We can kind of play around with scales where you use some notes twice. That doesn't really fall into the heading of true serialism, but it's an option, you know. Like, who cares about sticking to the rules if the music sounds cool, right? So let me run through these. So the first one, so fourths was just as a way of showing you the potential. So I'm going to show you now semitones. So here's a whole tone scale. It's going to be chromatic scale, of course, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to do a minor third. Here we go, so. could do perfect fourth. Of course, then I can kind of go thirds. Like so. Yeah, that's right. Then I can do perfect fifths. Like this. Again. And of course we go. Okay. We can do a major six. So with this in mind, I'm going to move to here so I can go this way. So yeah, we would have done perfect fifth. So major sixth is that. So that's our shape now. Okay, and then we're going to go to so. Okay, we can do major sevens. Bit out, which is a semitone displaced. Okay, so we run through them again. Semitones, minor thirds, perfect fourths, fifths, sixths, major sevens. Okay, I think the fourths are probably the easiest ones. And the one that I'd heard the most, guys like Michael Brecker would use that kind of idea a lot, you know. So maybe the fourths would be a good way in, but I think it's good fun to explore them all. Okay, there you go. So there we have it. Number 19 is in the can. So yeah, week 20 next week. Who would have believed it? Yeah. So as I said at the start, maybe I'll bake a cake, or I'll wear a party hat or something for next week. So thanks for getting this far. I really appreciate all the super kind comments. It's really great to hear from you. And I've had some lovely emails and some really nice comments. It's great. It really inspires me to keep going, you know. And this is good. Hopefully, it's good for all of us. You know, it's good for me, certainly. It keeps me thinking about things. It keeps me practicing and gives me a focus to my own sort of personal development. And I'm hoping that the exchange of ideas has given you some ammunition or some fuel, as Pete Zeldman, the expression Pete uses, you know, fuel. These ideas of fuel for your own musical endeavours. So please do keep the questions coming. If I don't get round to them straight away, it's just because there's other things sort of in the pipeline, or sometimes I'm waiting to kind of make things align so that it matches like the material that I'm going to play or what have you. I still don't know what tunes I'm going to play in the coming weeks. So if you've got any suggestions for tunes that you might want to hear, then you know, please shout out. I'm having fun sort of, because I make the backing tracks, and it's great to play a bit of bass on them and play a bit of acoustic rhythm guitar. If it works in that scenario where I can just play acoustic rhythm, bass, and then, you know, I'll play the live lead part against it, then any tunes is a consideration. I'm hoping to get more time to work on my own tunes, so hopefully I'll play more of those as things progress. I've got some exciting news for coming weeks. I've floated the idea amongst some of my friends in the guitar community, and they've got back with universally positive responses, that I'm now considering in the coming weeks inviting a guest on. So players who do things that just mind-blowingly talented guys who do things in different areas of expertise than my own, and I've asked them to submit just a short video that I can embed in with the regular weekly thing. So I'm hoping that might be a great way to just expand upon what this is, what is possible of achieving, what the potential is. But that's something that's going to happen over the next few weeks. Please, if you feel inclined to, shares and comments and just letting people know that this exists, it's all really helpful. So if you know anybody that you think might appreciate any of this information, then let them know about this. Feel free to shout out with suggestions of things that might work for future topics, any questions, or even just if you want to just drop me a line and say hello, send me a wave or something. It's really nice to know that you're out there. I would say it'd be great to see you on a gig, but you never know. Touch wood. We had a little kind of moment there where it looked like gigs were coming back, and I did actually get some gigs in the diary, and now this sort of 10 p.m. curfew has put pay to that idea for a little while anyway. But you've got to remain positive, I think, and count your blessings. Certainly I have. There's more important things in life at the moment than just gigging, and sometimes a little break from it makes you reevaluate what's important and what's not. So once again, thanks very much. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday and you have a great week, and I'll see you next week for number 20. Cheers.